4 hours before the dollar bill changed everything, a girl sat in the back seat of a silver sedan and counted the mile markers
That'll
through
be
the window.
$3.
She had started
Okay.
counting at mile marker
Thanks.
212
Bye.
somewhere outside Denver when the city lights faded and the world turned flat and dark. By mile marker 180, the man in the driver's seat had stopped pretending to be friendly. By 145, he had stopped talking altogether. The radio was off. The only sound was the engine and the tires on the road and the faint whistle of air through a window seal that didn't close all the way. Her name was Wren Monroe. She was 9 years old. She weighed 62 pounds. She was wearing a red hoodie that was too big for her and sneakers that were too big for her and jeans with a hole in the left knee that she had patched herself with a strip of duct tape 3 weeks ago. Everything she owned fit in the pockets of that hoodie. A blue pen with a cracked cap, a hair tie. $2 bills wrinkled and soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. $2. That was everything. The man driving had told her his name was Dan. He had walked up to her in a park in Denver that morning, a park near a row of apartment buildings where the swings were rusted and the slide had a crack down the middle. Wren had been sitting on a bench watching other children play with their parents. She had been alone for 2 days. Her mother had left on a Tuesday afternoon, said she would be back by dinner. The door closed, the lock clicked, and that was the last sound Wren Monroe heard her mother make. She waited through Tuesday night, through Wednesday, through Thursday morning. She ate the last of the cereal dry because the milk had gone bad. She slept in her mother's bed because it still smelled like her perfume, a cheap vanilla scent from a bottle with a cracked pump that sat on the bathroom counter. By Thursday afternoon, the apartment was silent in a way that had nothing to do with noise and everything to do with absence. Wren had walked to the park because she didn't know what else to do. The man had been standing by the fence. He said he knew her mom. He said her mom had asked him to come pick Wren up. He said he was taking her somewhere safe, somewhere her mom would meet them later. Wren had known it was a lie. She knew it the way a child knows things that adults think children are too young to understand. She knew it in the way his eyes moved too fast, checking the park, checking the sidewalk, checking to see if anyone was watching. She knew it in the way he smiled. A smile that was just the shape of a smile without anything behind it. The way a mask is the shape of a face. But she got in the car anyway, because the apartment was empty, because the cereal was gone, because she was 9 years old, and it was either get in the car with a liar or sit on that bench until someone called the police, and the police would put her in a home, and the homes were places she had heard about from other kids at school. Places where you shared a room with strangers and your things disappeared and nobody called you by your name. So she got in. And now 4 hours later, the mile markers had stopped because the highway they were on didn't have them anymore. It was a smaller road, 2 lanes cutting through empty land. The man who called himself Dan was pulling into a gas station, a Shell station, the only light for miles. He parked near the pumps but didn't get gas. He turned off the engine and looked at her in the rearview mirror. "You want a candy bar?" he asked. She nodded. He reached into his pocket and handed her $1. "Go inside and buy whatever you want. Come right back." She got out of the car. The night air was cold and dry and smelled like sage and gasoline. The pavement was cracked. The neon sign above the pumps buzzed and flickered, red and white light washing across the lot in alternating pulses. She walked toward the glass doors and pushed them open, and the electronic chime announced her arrival to no one who cared. Inside, she walked past the aisles of chips and motor oil and reached the candy display. She picked up a Snickers bar. Then she walked to the restroom at the back of the store. The bathroom door was heavy. The lock was broken. She propped it shut with her foot and stood at the sink, pressing her own dollar bill flat against the porcelain edge. Not the dollar the man had given her. Her own. One of the 2 she had left in the world. She pulled the blue pen from her pocket. The cap was cracked and the ink was low. So she pressed hard, pressing the point into the paper until the fibers darkened and the letters appeared across George Washington's face. Her hand was shaking. The E came out smudged where her palm dragged across the wet ink. But the words were legible. 2 words in a child's handwriting pushed hard into the paper by a hand that understood this might be the only chance she would get. "Help me." She folded the bill, slid it into her palm, and walked back to the counter. At 10:18 p.m., she stood at the register and placed the dollar flat on the scratched formica, smoothing it with both hands. The words faced up. She looked at the clerk, looked right at him. A young man, mid-20s name tag that read Kyle polo shirt with appealing logo. She willed him to see it, willed him to read the two words written across Washington's face. He picked up the dollar without looking at it, dropped it in the register, handed her the Snickers bar. Something inside her chest folded in on itself like a paper crane being crushed in a fist, but her face didn't change. She had learned a long time ago not to let her face show what was happening inside. She took the candy bar. She did not open it. She held it at her side like something she had been told to carry. A man appeared at the end of the aisle, tall, late 30s, sunglasses despite the hour, unshaven jaw, wrinkled shirt untucked on one side. He walked to her, placed his hand on the back of her neck, and steered her toward the door. She did not resist. She did not look back. The electronic chime sounded as the door swung shut behind them. Through the glass, the silver sedan pulled out of the lot, its plates caked with dried mud, and turned east onto the highway. The fluorescent lights hummed. Kyle scrolled through his phone. The gas station sat alone on that stretch of road, a single bright box in a landscape of darkness. No other buildings for a mile in either direction. The fluorescent canopy over the pumps cast a flat white glare across cracked pavement. A plastic bag tumbled across the lot in the wind, caught on a pump handle, and hung there trembling. 12 minutes passed. The door chimed again. The man who walked in was not tall, but he filled the doorway in a way that had nothing to do with height. He wore a black leather vest over a dark thermal shirt, jeans faded white at the knees, and boots that had walked through things most people never would. A scar ran down the left side of his neck, starting just below his ear and disappearing beneath his collar. It was old, healed white, the kind of scar a man stops explaining after the first 100 times someone stares at it. His name was Colt Greer. He walked to the counter, picked up a pack of Marlboro Reds, and set a $20 bill beside the register. Kyle rang it up without speaking. The change came back in a neat pile. 3 5s, 4 1s. Colt counted them under the fluorescent light, the way a man counts change when he has spent most of his life making sure every dollar went somewhere that mattered. He stopped at the last bill, turned it over. Blue ink, a child's handwriting. 2 words pressed so hard into the paper that the pen had nearly torn through. Help me. He stared at it, read it again, looked up at the empty parking lot through the glass doors, looked at Kyle, looked back at the bill. He folded it, once slid it into the inner pocket of his vest, and walked outside. His motorcycle sat at the edge of the lot, a black Harley-Davidson with worn leather saddlebags and a dented gas tank. The engine was still ticking, cooling in the night air. He did not get on it. He stood there, the dollar bill in his hand, now studying it under the parking lot lights. The sign overhead hummed and popped. The wind pushed a crumpled receipt across the asphalt. The highway stretched dark in both directions, no taillights, no movement, just the hum and the wind and the vast open nothing of the Colorado plains at night. He walked back inside. Kyle was leaning against the register, thumbing through his phone. He looked up when the door chimed. Colt set the bill on the counter. "The girl who gave you this," he said. "Where'd she go?" Kyle glanced at the bill, then back at Colt. His expression didn't change. "Some guy came in with her, bought her a candy bar. They left." "What guy?" "Tall, sunglasses, didn't say much." "What kind of car?" Kyle scratched his neck. "Didn't see, I wasn't paying attention." Colt looked at him, said nothing. Let the silence do what silence does when a man with a scar down his neck stands across a counter from a boy who hasn't learned to look up from his phone. Kyle shifted his weight. "You see what's written on this?" Colt asked. "No." Colt slid the bill closer. Kyle looked down at it, read the words. His face changed just slightly, a tightening around the eyes, the kind of expression a person makes when something uncomfortable interrupts the smooth, flat surface of not caring. "That's messed up," Kyle said. "You didn't notice." "Man, I handle like 300 bills a night. I don't read them." Colt didn't move. He watched Kyle's face the way a man watches a compass needle that refuses to settle. "Security cameras?" Colt asked. Kyle nodded toward the corner of the ceiling. A black plastic dome cracked no indicator light. "Broken," he said. "Been broken for like a year." "Do you remember anything else about the girl? About the guy?" Kyle sighed and set his phone on the counter. "She was quiet, didn't say anything. The guy paid and they left. That's it." Which direction? I don't know. I didn't watch. Colt picked up the bill and folded it back into his vest. He turned toward the door, stopped halfway, looked back. She looked scared. Kyle hesitated. His hand stopped moving towards his phone. He stood there for a moment, and something passed across his face that might have been shame or might have been nothing at all. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, she did. Colt stepped outside. The night air hit him cool and dry, carrying the smell of sage and diesel. His Harley sat where he'd left it, engine silent, now chrome catching the red pulse of the neon sign. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket and dialed a number. It rang twice. Yeah, a rough voice, older, the kind of voice that sounds like it was poured over gravel and left to dry out. It's Colt. I'm at the Shell off 47. I need you here. What's going on? Just come. Bring whoever's close. He hung up, slid the phone back into his pocket, pulled the dollar bill out again, and held it under the parking lot light, tilting it so the ink caught the glow. A 9-year-old's handwriting. The H was too tall. The E was smudged. The L leaned to the left. The P was barely a P at all, more like a stick figure of a letter drawn by a hand that was running out of time. He walked to the edge of the lot and stood at the border where the pavement ended and the darkness began. The highway ran east and west, 2 lanes of blacktop cutting through flat land. No lights in either direction except the distant amber glow of a town too far away to name. He waited. 15 minutes later, headlights appeared on the western horizon. 3 sets, single file, moving slow. The sound came next, a low rumble that built as they approached the unmistakable growl of V-twin engines running heavy in the night. 3 motorcycles pulled into the lot and parked in a line beside Colt's Harley. The engines cut simultaneously, and the silence that followed was sudden and thick. The first man off his bike was in his late 50s, bald with a gray beard that reached the middle of his chest. He wore a black leather vest over a faded denim shirt, the back covered in patches that had been sewn and re-sewn over decades. His hands were wide, his knuckles scarred. His name was Briggs. He had been riding longer than most of the others had been alive. The second was thick-shouldered, late 40s with tattoos running up both arms and disappearing under his sleeves. His name was Ray. He didn't talk much, but when he moved, people moved out of the way. The third was younger, maybe 30, lean and sharp-featured, with a shaved head and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. His name was Milo. He had the kind of energy that sat just below the surface, the kind that made bartenders nervous and cops reach for their radios. Briggs walked up to Colt and stopped a few feet away. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just waited. Colt handed him the dollar bill. Briggs held it up, tilted it toward the light. Read the words. His jaw tightened beneath the gray beard. He handed it to Ray, who read it and passed it to Milo. None of them spoke for a moment. When, Briggs asked, got it 12 minutes after she left. She was here with a ma, tall, sunglasses. The clerk didn't see the car. She write this here. I think so. She bought something, candy bar, handed the bill to the clerk when she paid. Briggs looked at the gas station, then back at Colt. Could be nothing. Could be, Colt said, but it's not. Briggs didn't argue. He had ridden with Colt for 8 years. He knew the difference between a man guessing and a man who had already decided. She's gone, Milo said. They could be anywhere. Maybe, Colt said, or maybe they didn't go far. Briggs looked at him. Why, because she wrote this for a reason. She didn't drop it. She handed it to the clerk. She wanted someone to find it. And if she wanted someone to find it here on this stretch of road, maybe she knew they were stopping close. The wind picked up. A loose chain rattled on one of the bikes. There's a motel 2 miles east, Ray said. His voice was deep and unhurried, like a man describing the weather. The Pines, pay by the hour place. People go there when they don't want to be seen. Briggs looked at Colt. Colt nodded. We check it, Briggs said. They rode without headlights. It was Briggs who made the call. Once they cleared the gas station's glow, he killed his lights. The others followed without question. 4 motorcycles running dark down a 2-lane highway, engines throttled low, guided by nothing but the faint line of the road's center stripe and the instinct of men who had spent decades riding through places they probably shouldn't have been. The motel appeared after a 1.5 miles set back from the road behind a gravel lot. A single-story building, 10 rooms in a row, like a set of teeth with half of them missing. The light above room 1 was burned out. So were rooms 3, 4, 7, and 9. The one still lit gave off a weak yellow glow that did nothing to make the place look welcoming. A sign out front read, "The Pines Motor Lodge." The O in motor had fallen off years ago and been replaced with a hand-drawn circle in black marker. They pulled into the far end of the lot near a dumpster that smelled like rot and old rain. Killed the engines, sat in silence for a moment listening. A television murmured from one of the rooms. Somewhere a faucet dripped. The office at the end of the building glowed behind streaked glass, and through it a woman could be seen sitting behind a desk watching a small TV. Colt dismounted and walked to the office alone. The door chimed when he pushed it open. The woman looked up. She was middle-aged with bleached hair that had gone brassy at the roots and a cigarette burning in a glass ashtray beside her. The desk was cluttered with papers, a logbook, a coffee mug with a faded Broncos logo. The TV behind her was playing a rerun, the laugh track muffled and tinny. "Help you?" she asked. "Looking for someone," Colt said. "Man checked in tonight, tall, sunglasses. Might have had a kid with him." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. She took a drag from the cigarette and exhaled the smoke curling up toward a water-stained ceiling tile. She didn't answer right away. She studied Colt the way someone studies a situation they're not sure they want to be part of. Colt pulled the dollar bill from his vest and set it on the counter. The woman looked at it, read the words. Her hand stopped halfway to the cigarette. "Room 6, she said quietly. "Checked in about 40 minutes ago. Paid-ish." "He's still here." "Car's out front." Colt nodded and turned to leave. "Hey," the woman said. He stopped. "That girl," she said. Her voice had changed. The professional detachment was gone. What remained was something rawer, something that lived in the part of a person that never fully forgets what it was like to be small and afraid. "Is she okay?" "Not yet," Colt said. He walked back to the others. Briggs was leaning against his bike, arms crossed. Ray and Milo stood nearby watching the row of rooms like men watching a tree line they expected something to come out of. "Room 6, Colt said. "He's here." "Car?" Briggs asked. Colt pointed. A silver sedan was parked directly in front of room 6. The plates were caked with dried mud brown and thick, applied deliberately. You don't drive through that much mud by accident. You drive through it when you don't want anyone reading your plates. "What's the play?" Milo asked. "We knock," Briggs said. "We talk." And if he doesn't want to talk, Briggs didn't answer that. He started walking toward the room. The others followed. They stopped outside room 6. The curtains were drawn tight, but a thin sliver of light was visible at the bottom. No sound from inside. No television, no movement, nothing. Briggs knocked 3 times. Firm, patient. The kind of knock that says, "I'm not going away." Silence. He knocked again. A voice from inside muffled by the door. "Who is it?" "Need to talk to you," Briggs said. "About what?" "About the girl." A long pause, the kind of pause that fills with all the things a man considers when he realizes the night is not going the way he planned. Then footsteps. The lock turned. The door opened, a cracked chain still on. A face appeared in the gap. The sunglasses were off now. Late 30s, unshaven eyes, bloodshot and darting. He looked at Briggs, then at Colt, then at Ray and Milo standing behind them. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Yeah, you do," Colt said. The man started to close the door. Colt put his boot against the frame. "We're not leaving," Colt said. The man stared at him. His eyes went to the scar on Colt's neck, then to the leather vests, then to the 4 motorcycles parked at the edge of the lot. His breathing quickened. "She's my daughter," the man said. "No, she's not," Colt said. The man's jaw clenched. "Where is she?" Briggs asked. The man didn't answer. Colt pulled the dollar bill from his vest and held it up 6 inches from the gap in the door where the man could read every letter. "She wrote this," Colt said. "At the gas station, 20 minutes ago." The man's face went pale. The blood left it like water draining from a sink. His eyes locked on the 2 words written across Washington's face, and whatever composure he had been holding on to crumbled. "I don't," he started. Briggs pushed the door, not hard, just steady pressure the way water pushes against a dam. The chain was cheap motel hardware. It held for a second, then snapped. The door swung open. The man stumbled backward. And there, sitting on the edge of the bed, still wearing the torn red hoodie, was the girl. She looked up. Her eyes met Colt's. She did not speak. She did not cry. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her sneakers not quite reaching the floor. The Snickers bar sat unopened on the nightstand beside her. The room was small. One bed, a nightstand with a lamp that had a crooked shade, a bathroom door half open, fluorescent light spilling out. The carpet was brown and stained with things no one wanted to identify. The air smelled of cigarettes that had been smoked in that room for 20 years. A duffel bag sat on the floor beside the bed, unzipped, men's clothes spilling out. No child's clothes, no second bag, nothing that suggested this man had packed for a 9-year-old girl because he hadn't planned for her to need anything for very long. Briggs stepped inside first. Colt followed. Ray and Milo stayed in the doorway, filling it completely. Nobody was leaving through that door. The man backed against the wall, hands half raised. "Look," he said, "this isn't what it looks like." Briggs ignored him. He crouched down slowly, hands on his knees, until he was eye level with the girl. He didn't reach for her, didn't crowd her, just lowered himself into her line of sight and waited. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. "It's okay," Briggs said. His voice had changed. The gravel was still there, but underneath it was something almost gentle. "Nobody here is going to hurt you." The man pushed off the wall. "She doesn't have to talk to you. You can't just—" "Shut up," Colt said. The words were flat and final. The man's mouth closed. Briggs stayed focused on the girl. He waited, gave her time, didn't rush. "My name's Briggs," he said. "What's yours?" Her fingers tightened in her lap. Her lips moved barely. "Wren." "Wren," Briggs repeated. "That's a good name." She nodded, the smallest movement. "Wren, did you write on that dollar bill?" She hesitated, then nodded again. "Why?" Her eyes flicked toward the man, then back to the floor. "He told me not to," she said. Her voice was small and flat, like a sound coming from very far away. "But I did anyway." "That was brave," Briggs said. She didn't respond to that. The man spoke again, his voice tight and fast. "She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. I'm her—" Colt stepped toward him. One step. That was all it took. The man pressed himself harder against the wall, and the words died in his throat. Briggs stayed with Wren. "Is he your dad?" She shook her head. "Uncle Family." She shook her head again. "How do you know him?" Wren's hands began to shake. She pressed them together, squeezing hard, her knuckles going white. "He said he'd take me somewhere," she whispered. "He said it was safe." "Where? I don't know." "Where'd he pick you up?" She didn't answer. Her breathing quickened. Her chest rose and fell beneath the oversized hoodie. Briggs glanced at Colt, then back at Wren. "It's okay. You don't have to." "Denver," she said suddenly. "He picked me up in Denver." Briggs frowned. Denver was 4 hours west. "When?" he asked. "This morning." Colt looked at the man. "You drove her 4 hours." Silence. "Why?" Colt asked. The man said nothing. "Check the bag," Briggs said. Milo moved to the duffel bag, crouched beside it, and began pulling things out. Men's clothes, a phone charger, a wallet. He opened the wallet and flipped through it. "ID says Decker Shanks," Milo said. "Chicago address." "Long way from home," Briggs said. Decker Shanks straightened up slightly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't do anything wrong." "Then why'd she write 'help me'?" Colt asked. Decker's jaw worked. "She's a runaway. I was trying to help her. By driving her 4 hours to a motel in the middle of nowhere. I was going to call someone, social services. I just—" "Just what?" Colt said. Briggs held up a hand. "Wren," he said gently, "did you run away?" She looked up at him for the first time. Her eyes were red and tired, but there was something in them that had not yet been broken, something that still watched, still measured, still decided. "No," she said. "Where's your mom?" "I don't know." "Your dad?" "I don't have one." Briggs nodded slowly. "Who were you with before him?" Wren's eyes went back to the floor. She didn't answer. Milo pulled something else from the duffel bag, a small spiral-bound notebook with a bent cover. He opened it and flipped through the pages. Stopped. Read. Flipped another page. Read again. "Briggs," he said. Briggs stood and walked over. Milo handed him the notebook. Briggs read. His expression didn't change, but his grip on the notebook tightened until the tendons in his hand stood out like cables. What is it? Colt asked. Briggs closed the notebook and looked at Decker Shanks. You want to explain this? Decker's face went white. That's private, he said. You can't just... It's a list, Briggs said. He turned to Colt. Names, ages, addresses. Colt took the notebook, opened it, scanned the pages. His jaw set hard. 12 names, Colt said. All girls, all under 12. Decker shook his head rapidly. It's not what you think. I'm a social worker. Those are my cases. Colt looked at Wren. Is he a social worker? She shook her head. Where'd you meet him? Her voice cracked. A park in Denver. What were you doing there? Playing. She nodded. And he came up to you. He said he knew my mom. He said she sent him to get me. Where's your mom, Wren? The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. It pressed down on the room like a physical thing. She left 2 days ago, Wren whispered. She didn't come back. Colt looked at Decker. You told her you knew her mom. Decker didn't answer. You lied to a 9-year-old girl whose mother had just abandoned her. Decker opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Colt handed the notebook back to Briggs. He walked to the door, stood in the frame, and looked out at the parking lot, at the gravel and the darkness and the long empty highway beyond. Briggs turned back to Wren. His voice was steady and low. Did he hurt you? She shook her head. Did he touch you? She shook her head again. Did he say what he was going to do? Wren's voice was barely audible, a breath shaped into words. He said we were going to meet someone. Who? I don't know. He said a word on the phone, a name maybe, but I didn't understand it. I thought it was a place. Briggs looked at Decker. Who were you meeting? Decker said nothing. Ray moved closer. He stood over Decker, not touching him, not speaking, just occupying the space the way a storm occupies a horizon. Decker pressed himself into the corner. Answer him, Ray said. Nobody. I wasn't meeting anybody. Then why bring her here? Colt asked from the doorway. I told you. I was going to call someone. Briggs walked to the nightstand and picked up the motel phone. He dialed 3 numbers. Waited. Someone answered. I need police at the Pines Motel off Highway 47, room 6. Man here with a child that isn't his. We've got a situation. He hung up. Decker's eyes went wide. Wait, You'll get one, Briggs said. He crouched back down in front of Wren. The police are coming, he said. They're going to help you. Wren looked at him. Her eyes were wide, but it wasn't the fear of what was behind her. It was the fear of what was ahead. I don't want to go with them, she said. Why not? They'll put me somewhere, a home. I don't want to go. You can't stay here, Briggs said gently. I know. Her voice broke on the second word, but I don't want to go with them. Briggs didn't have an answer for that. He looked at Colt. Colt was still standing in the doorway, his back to them, watching the highway. It'll be okay, Briggs said, but the words sat in the air like something that didn't quite fit. Wren wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. He said he'd take me somewhere safe, she said. He lied. I know. Everyone lies. Briggs did not argue with that. Sirens rose in the distance, thin and growing. Red and blue light began to pulse against the low clouds on the western horizon, growing brighter as the sound grew louder. Decker stood up from the corner, his hands shaking. I want a lawyer. You'll get one, Briggs said again, the same tone, the same flatness. The sirens arrived. 2 patrol cars pulled into the lot and parked at angles, their lights painting the motel walls in alternating red and blue. 4 officers got out. One of them, older, gray-haired, with the unhurried walk of a man who had seen enough crime scenes to stop rushing toward them, approached Colt. You the one who called? My friend did, Colt said. What's going on? Room 6, man in there name's Decker Shanks, Chicago ID. He's got a 9-year-old girl with him that he picked up in a park in Denver this morning. Drove her 4 hours. Brought her here. We found a notebook in his bag. 12 names. All girls, all under 12, ages and addresses. The officer's expression hardened. The lines around his eyes deepened. Is she okay? Physically. The officer nodded and motioned to the others. They moved toward the room. Briggs stepped out as the officers entered. Wren stayed on the bed, small and still, as they moved around her, cuffed Decker and read him his rights. She didn't look at him. She looked at the wall. A younger officer, a woman with her hair pulled back tight, knelt beside Wren and spoke softly. Asked questions that Wren barely answered. Yes. No. Wren Monroe, 9, Denver. No, she didn't know where her mother was. Briggs watched from the doorway. Colt stood beside him. She doesn't trust them, Colt said. Can't blame her, Briggs said. The female officer stood and walked over to them. You guys know her? No, Briggs said. Found her about an hour ago. How? Briggs pulled the dollar bill from his vest and handed it to her. She read it, looked back at Wren sitting on the bed, looked at the bill again. Jesus, she said quietly. She handed it back to Briggs. He passed it to Colt without a word. Colt folded it and put it in his vest. We'll take her to the county facility. They'll figure out placement from there. She doesn't want to go spa, Colt said. Doesn't matter. She's a minor with no guardian. She goes into the system. Colt looked at her. The system that her mother walked out of 2 days ago. The officer's jaw tightened. I don't make the rules. She walked back inside. A minute later, she came out with Wren. The girl's hands hung at her sides. Her head was down. She walked the way people walk when they've stopped believing that where they're going matters. As they passed Briggs and Colt, Wren stopped. She looked up at Colt. Not at Briggs, who had been gentle. Not at the officer, who had been kind. She looked at Colt, the man who had found her message, who had not left, who had come to a motel in the middle of nowhere on a Thursday night because a 9-year-old girl he'd never met had written 2 words on a dollar bill. Thank you, she whispered. Colt nodded. You're going to be okay. She didn't look like she believed him, but she nodded back a mirror of his gesture, and then she turned and walked to the patrol car. They opened the back door. She climbed in. Small and silent, her red hoodie bright against the dark interior of the car. The door closed. The officers brought Decker out next, hands cuffed behind his back. He didn't look at anyone. They put him in the second car. The engine started. The cars pulled out of the lot lights, flashing sirens off. They turned west onto the highway and shrank into the distance until they were just 2 sets of taillights. Then one, then nothing. Briggs and Colt stood in the empty lot watching. Milo came out of the room holding the notebook. What do we do with this? Give it to the cops, Briggs said. They'll need it. Milo nodded and headed for his bike. Colt looked at Briggs. She's not going to be okay. Maybe not tonight, Briggs said, but she's alive. She's out of that room, that counts. Colt didn't answer. He pulled the dollar bill from his vest and looked at it one more time. The shaky letters, the smudged ink, the desperation pressed into every stroke. She trusted us, Colt said. She trusted you, Briggs corrected. She wrote that bill before she ever knew you existed. She trusted whoever would look. They walked back to their bikes. Nobody spoke. The gravel crunched under their boots. Ray swung a leg over his Harley and sat there for a moment, staring at the motel, at the open door of room 6, at the thin curtain moving in the draft. Milo was already on his bike, hands on the handlebars, but he hadn't turned the key. He was looking at the silver sedan, still parked in the lot. The cops had taken Decker but left the car. It sat there under the yellow light, mud-caked plates, windows rolled up, engine cold. A vehicle that had carried a child 4 hours into nowhere, for reasons that none of them wanted to say out loud, but all of them understood. Colt put his hand on the ignition but didn't turn it. He sat on his Harley and looked at the building. 10 rooms, 1 story. A place designed for people passing through, for people who didn't want to be found, for transactions that happened in the dark and were forgotten by morning. How many times had something like this happened here? How many cars had pulled into this lot with mud on their plates and a child in the back seat? How many times had the woman at the front desk looked the other way? He thought about Kyle at the gas station, scrolling through his phone, handling 300 bills a night without reading any of them. He thought about all the moments in a day when someone could have seen something, could have said something, could have paused for 5 seconds and looked, and didn't. The engine started. 4 bikes, 4 riders. They pulled out of the lot in formation, headlights on now, and rode west on Highway 47. The road was empty, the night was clear. The stars spread across the sky like something spilled and never cleaned up. They rode for 20 minutes without stopping. The wind was cold at 60 miles an hour. It cut through leather and denim and found the skin underneath. None of them slowed down. The motel shrank behind them. The light in room 6 was still on. The door hung open, the chain broken, swinging in the wind like something that had given up. Somewhere on that same highway, heading the other direction, Ren Monroe sat in the back of a patrol car with her fingers laced together on her knees and her forehead pressed against the cold window glass. The road scrolled past in the darkness. Fields, fences, the occasional light from a farmhouse set far back from the road, yellow and small. The kind of light that means someone is home, someone is waiting, someone left the porch light on. She watched each one pass and disappear behind her. The officer driving didn't speak. The radio crackled occasionally. The heater blew warm air that smelled like vinyl and coffee. Wren's sneakers didn't quite reach the floor. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, making herself as small as possible in the back seat. She did not know where she was going. She did not know what would happen when she got there. She did not know if the man they had arrested would stay arrested, or if he would come back, or if someone else would come instead. But she knew one thing. Someone had seen the dollar. Someone had come back. A man with a scar down his neck and a leather vest in hands that looked like they had been through wars, and he had come to a motel in the middle of nowhere because a 9-year-old girl he'd never met had written 2 words on a piece of paper. He hadn't walked past. He hadn't shrugged and put the bill in his pocket and forgotten about it. He had read the words and he had come. That single fact, small and fragile and improbable, was the first true thing that had happened to Ren Monroe in a very long time. 48 hours passed. 2 days of ordinary life for most people in eastern Colorado. 2 days of pumping gas and buying groceries and watching television and sleeping in beds that belonged to them. For Colt Greer, the 2 days were anything but ordinary. He couldn't sleep. The first night he lay in his room at the clubhouse, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of a country that didn't exist. He replayed the scene in his mind, the motel room, the girl on the bed, the torn red hoodie, the sneakers that didn't reach the floor. The way she'd said, "help me," like it was something she'd been practicing, like she'd rehearsed it in her head 100 times during the 4-hour drive from Denver. The dollar bill sat on his nightstand. He'd taken it back from Briggs after the officer returned it. He didn't know why he'd kept it. It was evidence, technically. He should have left it with the cops. But something about those 2 words, the shaky ink, the smudged E, the desperation pressed into every stroke, made it impossible to hand over and walk away. He kept thinking about the notebook. 12 names, 12 girls, all under 12, ages, addresses as details. That wasn't a list someone made casually. That was inventory. The second day he rode to the gas station and talked to Kyle again. The kid remembered nothing new. Colt rode out to the highway and followed it east the same direction the silver sedan had gone, counting the miles. He found the motel. The parking lot was empty. The silver sedan had been towed. The door to room 6 was closed now, a piece of yellow crime scene tape stretched across it, already sagging in the heat. He sat on his bike in the lot for 10 minutes looking at the door, and then he rode back. That evening he was sitting on the bench outside the clubhouse when Briggs walked up and sat down beside him. The sun was low, throwing long shadows across the gravel lot. Briggs was carrying 2 bottles of beer. He handed one to Colt. Neither of them opened them right away. "Heard something," Briggs said. Colt waited. "Decker Shanks. He posted bail this morning." Colt turned his head slowly. "Bail." "Someone sent a lawyer, private, out of Denver, showed up at the county lockup 6 hours after he was booked. Bail was set at $50,000. Cash bond. Someone paid it." "Who?" "That's the thing. Nobody knows. The lawyers are not talking. The money came through a trust. Shell company. Whoever put it up didn't want their name on it." Colt set the unopened beer on the bench beside him. He stared at the gravel between his boots. "He's got a notebook with 12 kids in it," Colt said. 12 names, 12 addresses, and someone with $50,000 in cash bailed him out in 6 hours. Briggs nodded. "That's not a drifter," Colt said. "That's not some guy who picks up kids in parks on his own." "No," Briggs said, "it's not. Someone's running this." Briggs took a slow drink from his beer. "The last page of that notebook," he said. Milo got a look before he handed it to the cops. He wrote down what he saw. Colt looked at him. There was a line at the bottom of the last page, handwritten, different pen than the rest. It said, "Delivery 6 a.m., judge confirmed." The words hung in the air between them. "Judge," Colt repeated. "That's what it said." Colt picked up the beer, opened it, and took a long drink. He set it back down and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "So a man picks up a 9-year-old girl in Denver," he said slowly. Drives her 4 hours east, brings her to a motel in the middle of nowhere, and he's supposed to deliver her to someone at 6 in the morning. And whoever that someone is, a judge confirmed it. That's what the notebook says. And now that man is walking free because someone with deep pockets and a good lawyer got him out before anyone could dig deeper. Briggs nodded. And the girl, Colt said. Wren, she's in the system now. County placed her in temporary foster care. Fort Morgan. The same system. Briggs didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both understood what Colt was saying. If whoever was behind Decker-Shanks had enough power to bail him out in 6 hours, had enough connections to get a private lawyer dispatched from Denver in the middle of the night, had the word judge written in a notebook full of children's names, then the system Wren Monroe had just been placed into was not necessarily a safe place to be. It was, in fact, the one place where someone with that kind of power could reach her most easily. Colt finished his beer, set the empty bottle on the bench, stood up. Where are you going? Briggs asked. Nowhere tonight, Colt said, but I'm going to find out who paid that bail. Colt, he stopped. Briggs looked at him. Be careful with this. If there's a judge involved, this isn't some low-life operation. This is somebody with a robe and a gavel and the power to put people in cages. You go at that wrong, you're the one who ends up inside. I know. Do you? Colt looked at the sky. The first stars were appearing in the east, faint and cold. She wrote 2 words on a dollar bill, he said, and she handed it to a stranger because there was nobody else, nobody in her life, nobody in the system, nobody at all, just a dollar and a pen and the hope that someone somewhere would actually look. He turned back to Briggs. I looked, he said, and I'm not done looking. He walked inside. The door closed behind him. Briggs sat on the bench for a while longer, finishing his beer, watching the stars multiply. He thought about the girl, about the notebook, about the word judge written in a dead man's hand on the last page of a list of children. He thought about all the things that happen in the dark and the spaces between what people see and what people choose to ignore. Then he stood up, dropped the empty bottle in the trash, and went inside to make some phone calls. The night settled over the clubhouse. The highway hummed in the distance. Somewhere out there, the system was doing what the system does. Processing, filing, placing, moving a child from one temporary space to another, the way a river moves a stone downstream, not caring where it ends up, only that it keeps moving. And in Fort Morgan, Colorado, in a small house with pale blue siding and a chain-link fence around the front yard, a 9-year-old girl lay awake in a bed that wasn't hers, in a room that wasn't hers, staring at a ceiling she didn't recognize. The room was clean, the sheets were soft, a nightlight shaped like a butterfly glowed orange in the corner. A woman named Margaret had given her a glass of milk and a peanut butter sandwich and shown her the room and said she could stay as long as she needed. The woman had kind eyes and a voice that didn't rush. She called Wren sweetheart and didn't ask too many questions. But Wren lay stiff on top of the covers, still wearing her jeans and her red hoodie, because she had learned that you don't undress in a strange place and you don't get under the covers of a bed that might not be yours tomorrow. You stay ready. You keep your shoes where you can find them in the dark. She wasn't thinking about the motel. She wasn't thinking about Decker-Shanks, or the long drive from Denver, or the park where he had found her sitting alone on a bench while other children had played with their parents. She was thinking about the dollar bill. She had one more, tucked into the pocket of her jeans, folded small, hidden beneath the seam where nobody would feel it if they patted her down. She had found it crumpled on the floor of Decker's car during the drive, wedged between the seat and the center console, while he stopped for gas somewhere west of Limon. She had palmed it and slid it into her pocket without making a sound. She had kept it because it was the only thing she had that was truly hers, not given to her by a stranger, not provided by a system, found and kept and hidden the way animals hide food for the winter. She hadn't written on it yet, but she knew she might need to. She closed her eyes and pressed her hand against her pocket, feeling the thin paper through the denim. The butterfly nightlight hummed softly. The house creaked in the way all old houses creak at night, settling into itself, adjusting to the weight of one more person under its roof. $1. One chance. She had used the first one and someone had come. She would save the second one for when things got worse. Because Wren Monroe was 9 years old, and she had already learned the lesson that most people spend their whole lives trying to avoid. Things always got worse before they got better. And sometimes they just got worse. 5 days after the night at the gas station, Colt Greer rode north to Fort Morgan. The sky was flat and white, the kind of Colorado sky that sits low over the plains like a lid pressed down on a pot. The wind came from the west, steady and dry, pushing dust across the highway and bending the dead grass along the shoulders. He rode alone. Briggs had offered to come. Colt said no. This wasn't club business. This was something else, something he didn't have a word for yet. The call had come that morning. A woman's voice, professional but tired, the kind of tired that comes not from one bad night, but from years of bad nights stacked on top of each other. Is this Colt Greer? Who's asking? My name is Nora Callahan. I'm a caseworker with Child Protective Services in Summit County. I'm calling about Ren Monroe. Colt had been standing in the kitchen of the clubhouse pouring coffee into a mug that had a crack running down one side. He set the pot down. Is she okay? She's safe. She's in temporary foster care while we locate family. Is there family? We're looking. Her mother has been reported missing. Father's not in the picture. We found an aunt in Nebraska, but she hasn't returned our calls. Colt stared out the window at the gravel lot at the row of bikes parked in the morning light. Why are you calling me? Because Ren asked me to. He didn't speak. She told me what you did, Nora continued, how you found her. She wanted me to tell you she's okay. Is she? Nora paused. The pause was longer than it should have been, and in that space, Colt heard everything she wasn't saying. She's safe, Nora repeated. That's not the same thing. No, Nora said, it's not. She's struggling, won't talk much, barely eats. The foster family is good, but she doesn't trust them. She doesn't trust anyone. Can you blame her? No, in another pause. She asked if she could see you. Colt's grip tightened on the phone. I'm not family. I'm nobody. You're someone she trusts. Right now, that's more than anyone else can say. Nora gave him an address, a house in Fort Morgan about an hour north. She said she could arrange a supervised visit that afternoon. I'll be there, Colt said. The house was small, pale blue siding that had faded unevenly darker where the sun hit and lighter in the shadows. A chain-link fence ran around the front yard, the gate slightly crooked on its hinges. The lawn was brown but mowed. A garden hose lay coiled near the porch steps like a sleeping snake. Colt parked his bike at the curb and cut the engine. The neighborhood was quiet. Working-class houses on quarter-acre lots, pickup trucks in driveways, an American flag hanging limp from a porch 2 doors down. Nora Callahan was waiting on the front steps. She was in her mid-40s, black hair pulled back, wearing dark slacks and a gray cardigan that she held closed against the wind. She stood as he approached. Colt? He nodded. She extended her hand. He shook it. Her grip was firm. Her eyes were sharp, the kind that measured people quickly and filed the results away for later. Thank you for coming, she said. How is she? Same. Quiet. She's been watching the window since I told her you were coming. Colt glanced at the house. A curtain moved in one of the front windows. A small hand there and gone. Nora led him inside. The house smelled like vanilla and laundry detergent. The floors were clean. The walls had pictures on them, framed photos of children at various ages, some matching the face of the woman who stood in the kitchen doorway watching Colt with the cautious expression of someone who has opened her home to strangers enough times to know that not all of them bring peace. This is Margaret Weed, Nora said, Ren's foster mother. Margaret nodded. She was in her 50s, solid and unhurried, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and an apron tied around her waist. She didn't offer her hand. She just looked at Colt, at the vest, at the scar, and then she looked at Nora. She's in the living room, Margaret said. Colt followed Nora through a short hallway. The living room was small, a couch with a crocheted blanket folded over the back, a television that was off, a basket of toys in the corner that looked untouched. And on the couch, sitting with her hands in her lap, wearing clean jeans and a pink t-shirt that someone had bought for her, was Ren Monroe. Her hair was clean now, brushed and pulled into a braid that someone, probably Margaret, had done for her that morning. Her face was scrubbed. The torn red hoodie was gone, replaced by clothes that fit, but that she wore the way a person wears a costume, something put on for the benefit of others. She looked up when he walked in. Her eyes went wide. Something moved behind them, fast and bright, like a match struck in a dark room. Hi, Ren, Colt said. She stared at him, didn't speak. Her hands tightened in her lap. Nora motioned to a chair across from the couch. Colt sat. Nora stayed by the door, arms crossed, watching. Margaret hovered in the hallway for a moment, then retreated to the kitchen. The clink of dishes, the sound of water running. Colt leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He didn't smile. He didn't try to make the moment something it wasn't. "You eatin'?" he asked. Wren nodded, small. "They treating you good here?" She glanced at the doorway where Margaret had been, then back at Colt. "Yeah." Silence. The clock on the wall ticked. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and stopped. "I wanted to say thank you," Wren said quietly. "You don't have to." "But I do." Her voice cracked on the second word, a hairline fracture running through the careful composure she had built around herself. "You helped me. You and the other men. We did what anyone should have done. But they didn't." Her eyes filled. She blinked and the tears stayed where they were, balanced on the edge but not falling. "Nobody else did. At the gas station, at the park in Denver. I tried to tell people before. Nobody listened." Colt's jaw tightened. He felt the tension spread through his neck and into his shoulders, the kind of tension that comes not from anger at a person, but at the shape of a world that allows things like this to happen. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's not your fault." "Still sorry." Wren looked down at her hands. She was quiet for a long time. The clock ticked. The water ran in the kitchen. Outside, the wind moved through the chain-link fence and made a sound like something breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, as if she were talking not to Colt but to the space between her hands. "In Denver," she said, "before him, before the park. I went to a gas station near our apartment. The day after my mom left. I was hungry. I didn't have money. I stood by the door and waited for someone to come out. A woman came out with a bag of groceries. I asked her if she could buy me something to eat." She paused. She looked at me like I was something on the bottom of her shoe. She walked around me. Didn't say a word, just walked around me like I was a cone in a parking lot. Colt didn't move. Then I tried a man at a bus stop, told him I was lost, told him my mom was gone. He said I should call 911 and walked away. He had a phone in his hand. He could have called for me, but he walked away. She looked up at Colt. Her eyes were dry now. The tears that had been balancing on the edge were gone, absorbed back into whatever reservoir they came from. "I tried 3 more people that day," she said. "Nobody helped. Nobody even asked my name. And then the next day, the man at the park told me he knew my mom, and I knew he was lying, but at least he was talking to me. At least he saw me." The room went silent in a way that had weight. It pressed against the walls. "That's why I got in the car," she said. "Not because I believed him, because he was the first person in 2 days who looked at me like I existed." Colt's hands were clasped between his knees. His knuckles were white. "They're trying to find my mom," she said, shifting to something factual, something that didn't require her to feel anything. "I heard them talking." "That's good." "I don't think they will." Why so? Because she didn't want to be found. Wren's voice was flat, not sad, not angry, just flat the way a landscape is flat when everything that once grew on it has been cleared away. "She left on purpose. She told me she'd be back, but she was lying, same as him." Colt glanced at Nora. Nora's expression was still controlled, but her eyes were not. "Maybe she got in trouble," Colt said. "Maybe she's trying to come back." Wren shook her head. "She's not." She looked up at him. "She told me once she wished I was never born. She said it when she was drunk. She probably doesn't even remember. But I do." The room went quiet. Not the quiet of absence, but the quiet of something heavy settling into place, a weight lowering itself to the bottom of everything. "They're going to put me with someone," Wren continued. "An aunt or something. Someone I don't know. And if that doesn't work, they'll put me somewhere else. And somewhere else after that. And I'll just keep moving until I'm old enough that nobody cares anymore." Nora stepped forward. "Wren, that's not—" "Yes, it is." Wren's voice sharpened. The flat landscape cracked, and underneath it was something harder, something that had been forged in the gap between what adults promised and what actually happened. "You know it is. You do this every day. You know how it works." Nora's mouth closed. She looked at Colt. Colt looked at Wren. "I just wanted to say thank you," Wren said. Her voice was quieter now, the sharpness gone, replaced by something that was worse because it was calmer. "Because for one night someone actually cared. And I know it can't last. I know you're going to leave and I'm never going to see you again. But it mattered. That night mattered. Colt sat with that for a moment. He didn't rush to fill the silence with comfort. He didn't reach for easy words. You're right, he said. I'm going to leave. And you might not see me again. But that doesn't mean nobody cares. It just means I can't be the one who stays. Why not? Because I'm not the right person for that. Then who is? I don't know yet, but someone. How do you know? Because you're still here. He held her gaze. You wrote on that dollar bill. You handed it to a stranger when you had no reason to believe anyone would look at it. That takes something most people don't have. I don't feel strong. You don't have to feel it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded a single small movement, deliberate and fragile, as if she were agreeing to something she wasn't sure the world would honor. Colt stood. Wren stood too. Can I hug you? She asked. Colt looked at Nora. Nora nodded. Yeah, Colt said. Wren stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his waist. She was so small that her head barely reached the middle of his chest. He put one hand on her back, careful and awkward, the way a man touches something he's afraid of breaking. She held on for 3 seconds. Then she let go. Goodbye, she whispered. Take care of yourself, Wren. She nodded. She sat back down on the couch, hands in her lap, and didn't watch him leave. Nora followed Colt to the curb. The wind had picked up. Dust skidded across the street. A screen door banged somewhere down the block and a dog started barking, then stopped, as if it had thought better of it. She's going to be okay, Nora said. You believe that? Nora hesitated. She looked at the house at the window where the curtain had moved earlier. It was still now. Wren was not watching. I have to, Nora said. If I stop believing that I can't do this job, and if I can't do this job, there's nobody standing between kids like her and whatever comes next. She turned back to Colt. Her eyes were tired. Not the tiredness of one bad day, but the tiredness of 1,000 days that each took something and never gave it back. I've had 146 cases in the last 3 years, she said. Kids pulled out of homes, kids placed in foster care, kids reunited with parents who swore they'd changed. You know how many of those cases ended the way I hoped? Maybe 20. Maybe. The rest just ended. The system processed them and moved on, and I moved on, and the kids moved on. And some of them are fine, and some of them aren't. And I lie awake at 3 in the morning thinking about the ones who aren't and wondering which one I should have fought harder for. She stopped herself, took a breath, straightened the cardigan. Sorry, she said. You didn't ask for that. No, Colt said, but I heard it. Nora looked at him. Something passed between them, not warmth, not friendship, but recognition. The recognition of two people standing on opposite sides of the same broken thing and seeing the same cracks. What happens now? Colt asked. We keep looking for family. If we can't find anyone suitable, she stays in foster care. And the man who took her, Decker Shanks. Nora's expression tightened. That's a law enforcement matter. I can't. He posted bail, Colt said. Someone paid $50,000 to get him out. Did you know that? Nora's face changed. The professional composure cracked, and underneath it was something Colt recognized. Not surprise, fear. How do you know that? She asked. I know. That's. She stopped, looked at the house, then back at Colt. That shouldn't have happened, not with those charges, not with what they found in his bag. It happened. Nora crossed her arms, gripping her own elbows. The wind blew a strand of hair across her face. She didn't move it. I'll look into it, she said. Do that, Colt said. He climbed onto his bike. And Nora, she looked at him. Keep her safe. That's my job. Then do it. He started the engine and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, Nora stood on the sidewalk with her arms still crossed, watching him go. 5 days passed. Colt and Briggs worked quietly. No noise, no attention, just questions asked in the right places to the right people. Briggs had connections, the kind that come from 30 years of riding through small towns and knowing whose brother worked at the courthouse and whose cousin tended bar near the county clerk's office. He made phone calls, he bought drinks, he listened. What they found was this. Decker Shanks had been processed through the Summit County court system. His case had been assigned to the Family and Juvenile Division. The presiding judge was a man named Harlan Tull. Judge Harlan Tull, 62 years old, 20 years on the bench. He lived in a stone house on 3 acres outside of Breckenridge, drove a black Lincoln, and attended the same church every Sunday morning in the same pew third row from the front left side. He had been appointed to the bench by a governor who was now dead and confirmed by a committee whose members had mostly retired. He was by all public accounts a pillar of the community, a man who decided the futures of children. His name appeared nowhere in connection with the Decker Shanks, not in the bail filing, not in the booking records, not in any document that Briggs could access through public channels. But his name appeared somewhere else. Briggs had a contact at the county clerk's office, a woman named Phyllis, who had been filing documents since before computers and who still kept a paper calendar on her desk. She owed Briggs a favor from 15 years ago that neither of them ever talked about. He called her on a Tuesday morning. "I need foster care placement records for Summit County," he said, "the last 2 years. Anything assigned through Judge Toll's court." Phyllis was quiet for a moment. "That's sealed." "I know. Briggs, I'm not asking for the files. I'm asking for a pattern. How many kids has Toll placed with the same family in the last 24 months? Another pause. Longer this time. "Then give me a day." She called back the next morning. 6 children, she said, all placed with the same foster family. A couple named Hendricks out near Silverthorne. All 6 placements came through Toll's courtroom, and all were emergency placements, which means they bypassed the standard review process. What happened to the kids? Bus. 3 are still listed as active placements with the Hendricks family. The other 3 were transferred. Transferred where? That's the thing, Briggs. The transfer records are incomplete. 2 of them list out-of-state placements with no receiving agency documented. The third just says relocated. No address, no caseworker assigned, no follow-up. Briggs sat in the quiet of his room with the phone pressed to his ear and felt something cold settle in the pit of his stomach. The kind of cold that doesn't come from temperature. The kind that comes from understanding. 3 kids vanished from the system, he said. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." He brought it to Colt that night. They sat in the back room of the clubhouse, a bare concrete space with a table and 2 chairs and a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. Briggs laid it out. 6 children, 1 judge, 1 foster family, 3 missing. Colt listened without interrupting. When Briggs finished, Colt sat back in his chair and stared at the table. "Toll," he said. "Toll. He's placing kids with this family on purpose, bypassing the review, and 3 of those kids are gone. That's what the records show. And Wren's case just got assigned to his court." Briggs nodded. The bulb overhead flickered. A moth circled it, tapping against the glass. "Has he made a ruling yet?" Colt asked. "On Wren, not yet. She's still with Margaret Wade in Fort Morgan. That's a temporary placement. Toll has to approve the permanent placement. And when he does..." Briggs didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew. When Harlan Toll approved Wren's permanent placement, it would be with the Hendricks family in Silverthorne. The same family that had received 6 children from his courtroom. The same family from which 3 children had disappeared into incomplete records and empty file folders. And Wren Monroe would be the 7th. 2 days later it happened. Nora Callahan called Colt at 7 in the morning. Her voice was different. The professional composure was thinner now, stretched tight over something that sounded like controlled panic. "Toll issued an order," she said. "He's transferring Wren to a new foster placement, a family called Hendricks out near Silverthorne. The transfer is scheduled for Friday." "That's 3 days from now." "I know, I flagged it. I told my supervisor the placement doesn't match my recommendation. I recommended Wren stay with Margaret Wade until we locate the aunt in Nebraska or find a suitable long-term family. And my supervisor said Toll's order overrides my recommendation. That's how the system works. A judge's order is a judge's order." Colt stood in the doorway of the clubhouse looking out at the highway. A semi-truck passed, shaking the ground. "Can you fight it?" "Not easily. I can file a formal objection, but that goes through the same court. Toll's court. He'd rule on his own order." "So the man who signed in the order gets to decide if his own order is valid. Welcome to family court." Colt closed his eyes, opened them. "What about the Hendricks family? What do you know about them?" "On paper, they're clean, licensed foster parents. Home inspections passed, no complaints on file. On paper. That's all I have, Colt. That's all anyone has. She paused, but something doesn't feel right. 6 placements in 2 years, all from the same judge, all emergency bypasses. That's unusual. I've been doing this job for 16 years, and I've never seen a pattern like that. It's not a pattern, Colt said. It's a pipeline. Silence on the line. Then what do you know? I know 3 of those 6 kids are gone. No transfer records, no follow-up. They went into that house and they didn't come out. Nora's breathing changed. He could hear it through the phone, the sound of someone absorbing information that rearranges the shape of everything they thought they knew. How do you know this? She asked. Doesn't matter. Can you stop the transfer? I can try to delay it. I can request a review based on concerns about the placement pattern. But if Toll pushes back, I don't have the authority to override him. And if I push too hard without documented evidence, I could lose my job. And then Wren has nobody advocating for her at all. How long can you stall? Maybe 72 hours. I can file a procedural delay, request additional documentation from the Hendricks family. It's standard enough that Toll can't refuse it without raising questions. Do it. Colt, if this is what you're saying it is, if a sitting judge is, do it, Nora. Buy the time. I'll get you the evidence. She was quiet for a long time. He could hear her thinking. He could hear the calculation, the weight of her career on one side, and the life of a 9-year-old girl on the other. 72 hours, she said, that's all I can give you. That's enough. He hung up and called Briggs. That night, Wren Monroe stood in the hallway of Margaret White's house in Fort Morgan, barefoot on the hardwood floor, and listened. She had heard the phone ring at 8:15 p.m. She had heard Margaret answer it. She had heard Margaret's voice change from pleasant to tense, and then Margaret had walked into the kitchen and closed the door, and Wren had pressed herself against the hallway wall and listened through the gap beneath the door. She couldn't hear every word, but she heard enough. Transfer, Friday, new family, judge's order. She heard Margaret say, I don't think she's ready. She heard the silence that followed, which meant whoever was on the other end didn't agree. She heard Margaret say, all right, I understand. And then she heard the sound of a woman sitting down in a kitchen chair and not moving for a long time. Wren went back to her room. She sat on the edge of the bed. The butterfly nightlight glowed in the corner. The window showed a dark street in a single streetlight in the silhouette of the chain-link fence. They were moving her. 3 days, a new house, new people. The same system turning its gears, moving her from one temporary place to another like a package being rerouted. She reached into the pocket of her jeans, which she had draped over the back of the chair. The dollar bill was still there, folded small, hidden in the seam. She pulled it out and held it in both hands. She thought about the gas station, about the clerk who didn't look, about the man with the scar who did. She thought about the sound of motorcycles pulling into the motel parking lot, about the door to room 6 opening, about the moment she looked up and saw someone standing there who had come because of 2 words written in blue ink on a piece of paper worth 100 pennies. She thought about what Colt had said. You wrote on that dollar bill. You handed it to a stranger when you had no reason to believe anyone would look. She put the dollar bill down on the nightstand. Then she looked at Margaret's phone, which was charging on the kitchen counter. Margaret was in the bathroom. The water was running. The door was closed. Wren walked to the kitchen. Her bare feet made no sound on the floor. She picked up the phone. Margaret didn't use a passcode. The screen lit up. Wren opened the recent calls. She scrolled until she found a number she didn't recognize. A number that wasn't Nora's. A number that had called Margaret's phone 4 days ago and spoken for 6 minutes. She didn't know whose number it was. But below it, in a text message from Nora sent 2 days before, was a number with a name next to it. Colt Greer, emergency contact. Nora had given Margaret Colt's number in case something went wrong. Wren memorized it. She put the phone back exactly where it had been. She walked back to her room and closed the door. She waited. The bathroom door opened. Margaret's footsteps moved down the hallway. The house settled. The clock ticked. At 9:47 p.m. When the house was dark and quiet and Margaret's light had been off for 20 minutes, Wren got out of bed. She walked to the kitchen. She picked up the phone. She dialed the number. It rang 3 times. Yeah, his voice. Rough. Tired. But there. It's Ren. Silence. Then Ren, are you okay? They're moving me. Her voice was steady. She had practiced this in her head for the last hour, lying in bed, staring at the butterfly. Nightlight running the words over and over until they were smooth and hard and wouldn't break when she said them. On Friday. A new family. The judge said so. I know, we're working on it. It's happening again. She gripped the phone with both hands. It's like before. Someone decides where I go and I don't get to say anything. I just get moved. Ren, listen to me. We're not going to let that happen. You said you can't be the one who stays. I can't, but I can be the one who fights. Promise? The line was quiet. She heard him breathing. She heard the night around him wherever he was, and then she heard the one word she needed. Promise, Devon. She hung up, put the phone back, walked to her room, closed the door. She didn't sleep. She lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, sneakers beside the bed, hand pressed against the pocket where the dollar bill waited. But something had changed. The first time at the gas station, she had written a message and handed it to a stranger and hoped. This time she had picked up a phone and called the only person who had ever come when she asked. The first time she had been rescued. This time she had acted. And somewhere in the back of her mind, in the part that was still building itself, still learning what it meant to be a person, in a world that had given her very little reason to trust it, a new understanding took shape. She was not just a girl who needed saving. She was a girl who could fight. She didn't know how yet. She didn't know what the fight would look like or how long it would last or whether she would win. But the fact of it, the simple, stubborn, irreducible fact that she had picked up a phone and made a call and said the words out loud, that fact changed something inside her that could not be unchanged. Ren Monroe closed her eyes. The butterfly nightlight hummed. The clock ticked toward Friday, and 72 hours began to count down. In a concrete room at the back of a clubhouse, 30 miles south, Colt Greer sat across from Briggs with a map of Summit County spread on the table between them. Milo sat in the corner quiet, sharpening a pencil with a pocket knife. Ray leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. 72 hours, Colt said. That's what Nora bought us. To do what? Milo asked. To build a case. To find enough evidence that Tull can't hide behind his robe. Something that forces someone above him to act. Briggs ran his finger along the map, tracing the road from Fort Morgan to Silverthorne. The Hendricks family. We need to know what's happening in that house. We need more than that, Colt said. We need the connection between Tull and Decker Shanks. The bail money, the notebook, the line that said judge confirmed. Right now, it's pieces. We need it to be a picture. The financial records, Briggs said. Phyllis told me Tull's been receiving payments through a trust. Same trust structure that paid Shanks's bail. If we can document that, show the money flowing from the same source to both of them, that's the thread. Can she get those records? She can get some of them. Court filings, public financial disclosures. Tull's required to file those annually. If there are payments that don't match his salary, that's a red flag. Do it, Colt said. And Ray. Ray looked at him. Drive out to Silverthorne. Don't go to the house. Don't talk to anyone. Just look. Count the cars. Count the lights. See if there are children visible. See if the place looks like a home or like something else. Ray nodded. He pushed off the wall and walked out without a word. Colt looked at Milo. You still have that photo of the notebook page, the one you took before you gave it to the cops. Milo reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled to a photo and turned the screen toward Colt. The image was slightly blurry but readable. The last page of the spiral notebook. Names and ages in one column, addresses in another, and at the bottom in different ink, the line, delivery 6 a.m., judge confirmed. Send that to Nora, Colt said, and tell her to keep it off the county servers. Personal phone only. Milo nodded. Colt sat back and looked at the map. Fort Morgan, Silverthorne, Breckenridge where Tull lived, the county courthouse where he sat, the gas station on Highway 47 where a 9-year-old girl had started all of this with a dollar bill and a pen. The distances were small. In a state the size of Colorado, everything in this story was happening within a circle you could drive across in 3 hours. A tight radius, a small world. The kind of world where a man with a judge's gavel could control the lives of children without anyone noticing because the people who might have noticed were either too far away, too busy, or too afraid. 72 hours. Colt folded the map and put it in his vest. He had work to do. The first 24 hours moved fast. Ray drove to Silverthorne alone in a borrowed pickup truck with no markings. He left before dawn and arrived by mid-morning parking at a diner half a mile from the Hendricks property. He ate breakfast slowly, drank 3 cups of coffee, watched. The Hendricks house sat at the end of a gravel road backed up against a tree line of blue spruce. It was larger than a typical foster home. 2 stories wide, siding a detached garage and a fenced backyard that couldn't be seen from the road. 2 vehicles in the driveway, a gray SUV and a white van with no windows in the back. The van had commercial plates. Ray watched for 4 hours. In that time, no children appeared outside. No one played in the yard. No one walked to the mailbox. The curtains on the second floor were drawn. A man came out of the house, once walked to the van, retrieved a cardboard box, and went back inside. He was in his 50s, heavy-set, wearing a flannel shirt and work boots. He didn't look around. He moved with the casual efficiency of a man doing routine work. At 2 in the afternoon, a black Lincoln pulled into the driveway. Ray straightened in his seat. The driver's door opened. A man got out. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a dark overcoat despite the mild weather. He walked to the front door without knocking. It opened before he reached it. He went inside. Ray wrote down the plate number. He finished his coffee, paid the bill, and drove back. That evening in the concrete room at the clubhouse, he laid it out. Black Lincoln, he said, Colorado plates. He slid the number across the table to Briggs. Briggs looked at it, then he looked at Colt. I'll run it. It took Phyllis less than an hour. The Lincoln was registered to a trust called Mountain Crest Holdings, the same trust that had paid Decker Shanks's bail, and Mountain Crest Holdings' registered agent, buried 3 layers deep in the filing paperwork at the Colorado Secretary of State's office, was a law firm in Denver whose senior partner had been Harlan Tull's college roommate. Briggs spread the documents on the table. Financial disclosures, trust registrations, bail receipts, placement orders. He arranged them in a line left to right, the way a man lays out a hand of cards. Here's Tull, he said, pointing to the judicial financial disclosure. Annual salary $168, normal for a family court judge. But here, he moved his finger to a bank statement Phyllis had pulled from a public filing connected to a property dispute. Deposits, 4 of them in the last 18 months, $15,000 each, $60,000 total. The deposits come from Mountain Crest. The same trust that bailed out Shanks, Colt said. The same trust whose car was parked in the Hendricks driveway this afternoon. Colt stared at the line of documents. The moth was still circling the bulb overhead, tapping against the glass. So the money flows like this, Colt said. Mountain Crest pays Tull. Mountain Crest pays Shanks's bail. Mountain Crest is connected to the Hendricks property. Tull places children with the Hendricks family through emergency orders that bypass review. 3 of those children are unaccounted for. That's the picture, Briggs said. It's not enough. Briggs looked at him. For us, it's enough, Colt said. We can see it. But for a courtroom, it's circumstantial. A defense lawyer would say the trust payments were consulting fees. The bail was a coincidence. The car at the house was a social visit. The missing children were legitimate transfers with paperwork that got lost. So what do we need? We need someone to say it, out loud, in front of someone who matters. Colt pulled the dollar bill from his vest. He didn't look at it. He held it between his fingers, feeling the paper, the texture of the ink. Nora's filing the delay tomorrow morning, he said. That gives us until Friday. If Tull pushes back, it could be sooner. And if it's sooner, then we go to court with what we have and hope it's enough. Milo, still in the corner, set down the pencil he'd been sharpening. Who do we take it to? Nora knows a federal magistrate, Colt said, out of the Denver district. She's been thinking about this since I told her about the Hendricks pattern. She said if we can present enough to justify an emergency review, the federal court can intervene, supersede Tull's authority. A federal judge overruling a county judge, Briggs said. It's been done. Not often. Doesn't need to be often, just needs to be once. Briggs leaned back in his chair. The old wood creaked under his weight. He looked at the documents on the table, at the map, at the photo of the notebook page on Milo's phone. 30 years I've been writing, he said, and I've never gone after a judge. First time for everything, Colt said. Could go sideways. Already has. Briggs picked up the trust registration document and held it up to the light, reading the fine print. Mountain Crest Holdings, he said. You know what that is? That's a machine. That's a system designed to move money and children and make both of them disappear. And at the top of that machine is a man in a black robe who gets to decide where kids go, and nobody questions it because he's a judge, because judges are trusted, because the system says so. The system's wrong, Colt said. The system's always wrong, Briggs said. The question is whether anyone cares enough to prove it. He set the document down and looked at Colt. All right, he said. We go to court. The second day, Nora filed the delay. She called Colt at noon to confirm. It's done, she said. I requested updated home inspection reports and additional references for the Hendricks family. Standard procedure. Toll can't deny it without flagging himself. How'd he react? His clerk called my office within an hour, asked why I was requesting additional documentation on a placement he'd already approved. I told her it was routine. Was she convinced? No, but she couldn't do anything about it. The request is legitimate. He has to wait. What about the federal magistrate? I spoke to her this morning. Judge Patricia Dwyer. She's reviewed the placement pattern in the financial documents your people found. She's concerned. She's agreed to hold an emergency hearing if we can present the evidence in person. When Friday, if we file by Thursday evening, she'll schedule it for Friday morning. Same day Toll's transfer order takes effect. That's cutting it close. That's the only window we have. Colt, I need you to understand something. If we go into that hearing and the evidence doesn't hold, Toll's order stands. Wren goes to the Hendricks family that same day, and I lose my job. And Toll knows someone was digging, which means he buries everything deeper and we never get another chance. The evidence will hold. You sure about that? Colt thought about Wren, about her voice on the phone 2 nights ago, steady and small and determined. They're moving me. It's happening again. I'm sure, he said. He hung up. He looked at the dollar bill on the table in front of him. 2 words in blue ink. Help me. He was going to need more than a dollar bill in a courtroom, but it was a start. The third day, Thursday, Nora filed the petition with Judge Dwyer's court. Colt drove to Denver with Briggs. They sat in a waiting room with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs while Nora presented the evidence to the magistrate's clerk. Trust documents, placement records, the photo of the notebook page, a sworn statement from Phyllis at the county clerk's office delivered by courier that morning, detailing the anomalies she had found. The clerk took everything, said the judge would review it that evening. At 9:14 p.m., Nora's phone buzzed, and she read the message and looked at Colt. Hearing granted, she said. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Federal Courthouse, Denver. Colt nodded. Toll's been notified, Nora added. He's required to appear. So is a representative from the Hendricks family. Will he come? He has to. A federal magistrate issued the summons. If he doesn't appear, it's contempt. Colt stood. He looked at Briggs. Briggs looked back. Neither of them said what they were both thinking, that tomorrow in a courtroom in Denver, they were going to challenge a sitting judge with 20 years of power and a machine built to make children disappear. That the evidence was strong but not bulletproof. That a good lawyer could poke holes in circumstantial connections. That Toll had survived 20 years on the bench because he was smart and careful, and because the system he had corrupted was the same system designed to protect him. But they also thought about Wren Monroe. 9 years old, Arndham, lying in a bed in Fort Morgan, awake, dressed, sneakers by the bed, a dollar bill in her pocket, waiting. 9 a.m., Colt said. 9 a.m., Briggs confirmed. They walked out into the Denver night. The city hummed around them, car horns, sirens in the distance, the glow of 100,000 windows. Somewhere in Fort Morgan, Wren Monroe sat on the edge of her bed and held the second dollar bill in both hands. She hadn't written on it. Not yet, but she had the pen ready. Wren Monroe woke at 5:14 a.m. on a Friday in late October and knew before she opened her eyes that today was the day. She lay in the bed at Margaret Weed's house and listened to the silence. The butterfly nightlight had burned out 2 days ago. The room was dark. Through the window, the sky was the deep blue black of a Colorado morning that hadn't yet decided whether to become day. She got up. She was already dressed. She had slept in her clothes the way she always did, jeans and the pink t-shirt sneakers beside the bed, where she could find them in the dark. She sat on the edge of the mattress and tied her shoes. Double knots, tight, the way you tie them when you know you might need to move. She went to the bathroom and washed her face. The water was cold. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her hair was tangled from sleep. She found the brush Margaret had given her and worked through the knots one at a time the way Margaret had shown her. Then she braided it herself. It wasn't as neat as Margaret's braids, but it held. It would do. She reached into the pocket of her jeans. The dollar bill was still there. She had been checking it every morning since the night she called Colt, pressing her fingers against it, through the denim, making sure it hadn't disappeared, making sure the world hadn't taken this one last thing from her. She unfolded it and looked at it. A blank dollar bill. No ink, no words. Just George Washington staring up at her with that expression that always looked to Wren like a man who had something to say but had decided not to say it. She folded it back up and put it in her pocket. Today she would go to court. Nora had told her yesterday. A hearing, a federal courthouse in Denver. A judge not tall, a different judge. A higher judge would listen to what Nora had to say about the placement order. And if Wren wanted to, she could speak. You don't have to, Nora had said on the phone. Nobody will make you, but if you want to, the judge will listen. Will he be there? Wren had asked. The judge who signed the order. Yes, he has to be there. Then I'll speak. She had said it the way she had written on the dollar bill. Not because she was brave, not because she felt strong, because there was nobody else to do it, and if she didn't, the machine would keep turning and she would be fed into it like paper into a shredder, and no one would hear the sound it made. Margaret drove her to Denver. They left at 6:30. The highway was quiet. The sun came up behind them, painting the rearview mirror gold. Margaret didn't play the radio. She drove with both hands on the wheel and glanced at Wren in the mirror every few minutes but didn't speak. Nora met them at the courthouse entrance at 8 o'clock. She was wearing a dark blazer. Her face was composed. Her eyes were not. She crouched down in front of Wren on the courthouse steps. How are you feeling? Nora asked. Fine, Wren said. It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that gets you through a door. You remember what we talked about. You don't have to say anything you don't want to. If you want to stop, just say so. I won't want to stop. Nora looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded and stood. She led Wren inside through the security line, through the lobby with its high ceiling and marble floor, to a small room on the second floor with a table and 2 chairs and a window that looked onto an alley. A woman in a gray suit was there, the child advocate. She introduced herself. Wren didn't remember her name 5 seconds later. It didn't matter. You'll wait here, Nora said. When the judge is ready, someone will come get you. Wren sat. The advocate sat beside her. The door closed. Wren put her hand in her pocket and pressed her fingers against the dollar bill and waited. 2 floors below in the parking garage across the street, 4 motorcycles pulled in at 8:17 a.m. and parked in a row on the second level, their engines echoing off the concrete walls before falling silent. Colt was the first off his bike. He wore the same leather vest he always wore, but underneath it was a clean black shirt buttoned to the collar. His boots were the same, his jeans were the same. The scar on his neck was the same. He had not dressed up for court. He had simply dressed clean the way a man does when he wants to be taken seriously without pretending to be something he's not. Briggs followed. He had trimmed his beard, not much, just enough to show the jawline underneath. He wore his vest over a dark flannel shirt, the patches on the back faded but intact. Ray came next, silent as always, his tattooed arms hidden under a denim jacket. Milo was last, the youngest, his shaved head bare in the morning cold, the scar through his eyebrow catching the fluorescent light of the parking garage. They walked across the street together. 4 men in leather and denim, moving through a crowd of lawyers in suits and clerks carrying file boxes. People stepped aside without being asked. Not out of fear, out of something closer to recognition. The recognition that these men occupied a different space in the world and that the space they occupied had its own rules. The security line at the courthouse entrance took 15 minutes. They emptied their pockets, removed their belts, walked through the metal detector one at a time. A guard looked at Colt's vest and then at his face and then waved him through without comment. The hearing was in courtroom 4, second floor. Nora Callahan was already there, sitting at a table on the left side of the room, her files arranged in neat stacks before her. She was wearing a dark blazer over a white blouse, her hair pulled back tighter than usual. She looked up when Colt entered and gave a small nod. Her face was composed, but her hands resting on the table were pressed flat against the wood as if she were trying to keep them from shaking. The courtroom was small by federal standards, dark wood paneling, an American flag behind the bench, 2 rows of gallery seating that could hold maybe 40 people. The ceiling was high and the windows along the east wall let in long rectangles of morning light that fell across the floor in pale gold bars. Colt, Briggs, Ray, and Milo took seats in the back row. They sat in a line, arms crossed or hands on their knees, and didn't speak. They watched the room fill. A clerk entered through a side door and placed a water pitcher on the bench. A court reporter set up her machine fingers, testing the keys without pressing them. 2 lawyers in dark suits came in and sat at the table on the right side of the room. One was in his 50s, silver-haired with a face that had been trained to show nothing. The other was younger, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than most people's monthly rent. Toll's lawyers. And then at 8:51 a.m., 9 minutes before the hearing was scheduled to begin, a man walked through the main doors of the courtroom and stood for a moment at the back, surveying the room with the unhurried authority of an owner inspecting his property. Judge Harlan Toll. He was 62 years old, tall, silver hair combed back from a high forehead. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, a white shirt open at the collar. His shoes were polished. His hands were clean and manicured. He carried nothing, no files, no briefcase, no notes. He had come to this hearing with nothing but himself and the assumption that himself was enough. He walked down the center aisle past the gallery where Colt sat and took a seat beside his lawyers at the right-hand table. He did not look at Nora. He did not look at the bikers in the back row. He sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and waited. Colt watched him. He studied the man's posture, the set of his shoulders, the angle of his chin. This was a man who had spent 20 years in a courtroom. He knew how rooms worked. He knew how to control them with silence, with posture, with the weight of authority that came not from what he said, but from who he was. This was the man who had signed the orders, who had placed 6 children with the Hendricks family, who had bypassed every safeguard the system had built to protect them. This was the man whose name was written in a notebook full of children's addresses, the man whose trust fund had bailed out a kidnapper, the man who sat in a courthouse every day and decided the futures of children while running a machine designed to make them disappear. He looked like a grandfather. He looked like someone you'd see at a church picnic, holding a paper plate and complimenting someone's potato salad. He looked like the kind of man who gets a standing ovation at a retirement dinner. That was the most dangerous thing about him. At 9 o'clock exactly, a door behind the bench opened. Judge Patricia Dwyer entered. She was in her late 50s, shorter than tall, with close-cropped gray hair and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. She wore the black robe. She carried a file that was thick enough to require both hands. "All rise," the clerk said. Everyone stood. Dwyer took her seat. Everyone sat. "This is an emergency hearing regarding the placement of a minor child case number 2024-FC-4471, Dwyer said. Her voice was clear and unhurried, the voice of a woman who did not need to raise it to be heard. "The petitioner is Nora Callahan, caseworker with Summit County Child Protective Services. The respondent is Judge Harlan Toll of the Summit County Family and Juvenile Court. Ms. Callahan, proceed." Nora stood. She picked up a folder from the table and opened it. "Your Honor," I am requesting an emergency review and stay of a placement order issued by Judge Toll's court regarding Ren Monroe, age 9. The order directs the transfer of Ms. Monroe from her current temporary foster placement to a family named Hendricks in Silverthorne, Colorado. She paused, took a breath. "My petition is based on a pattern of placements from Judge Toll's courtroom that taken together raise serious concerns about the welfare of children placed under his authority." She laid out the evidence the way Briggs had laid out the documents on the table at the clubhouse. One piece at a time. Steady, no rush. 6 children placed with the Hendricks family over 24 months, all through emergency orders from Toll's court bypassing the standard review process. 3 of those children subsequently listed as transferred with incomplete or missing documentation. No receiving agency, no follow-up caseworker, no forwarding address. She presented the financial records. Mountain Crest Holdings, the trust that had paid Decker Shanks's bail, the same trust that appeared in Toll's financial disclosure as a source of 4 payments totaling $60,000 over 18 months. The same trust whose registered agent was a law firm run by Tull's college roommate. She presented the photo of the notebook page. 12 names, 12 girls, and all under 12. And at the bottom, in different ink, delivery 6 a.m., judge confirmed. She presented Phyllis's sworn statement, the anomalies in the placement records, the gaps in the transfer documentation, the pattern that once you saw it could not be unseen. It took her 37 minutes. She spoke without notes for the last 10. Her voice did not waver. Her hands did not shake. She stood in a federal courtroom and accused a sitting judge of operating a pipeline that moved children from the custody of the state into a place from which some of them never returned, and she did it with the precision of a surgeon and the steadiness of a woman who had decided that this was the hill and she was not coming down. When she finished, she sat. The courtroom was silent. The morning light had moved across the floor. It now fell on the right-hand table on Tull's polished shoes on his crossed leg. Dwyer looked at Tull's lawyers. Response. The silver-haired lawyer stood. His name was Prescott. He spoke for 11 minutes. He called the financial connections circumstantial and misleading. He said Mountain Crest Holdings was a legitimate trust with dozens of transactions, and that payments to Judge Tull were for consulting work on juvenile justice reform, properly documented and fully legal. He said the placement pattern was consistent with Judge Tull's well-known advocacy for the Hendricks family, who had an excellent record and had been recognized by the county for their foster care service. He said the missing transfer records were an administrative oversight, nothing more, and that the children in question had been placed with families in other states through proper channels that simply hadn't been updated in the county system. He said the notebook was the property of a criminal defendant and had no verified connection to his client. He said the phrase "judge confirmed" could mean anything, and that connecting it to Judge Tull was speculation. He was smooth. He was practiced. Every sentence was designed to make the complicated simple and the suspicious innocent. He was good at his job. When he sat down, Tull uncrossed his legs, leaned forward, and spoke for the first time. Your Honor, if I may. Dwyer looked at him. Go ahead. Tull stood. He buttoned his suit jacket with one hand, the gesture of a man who has stood in courtrooms 10,000 times. I've served the children of Summit County for 20 years, he said. His voice was warm, measured, the voice of a man who knows how to make a room trust him. Every placement I've made has been in the best interest of the child. The Hendricks family has opened their home to children who had nowhere else to go. To suggest that I or they have done anything to harm these children is not just wrong. It's dangerous. It undermines the trust that holds the entire foster care system together. He paused, looked around the courtroom. His eyes passed over Nora, over the gallery, over the bikers in the back row. He lingered on Colt for a moment. Then he turned back to Dwyer. This hearing is based on the allegations of a caseworker who has a documented history of disagreeing with my rulings and on documents gathered by individuals with no legal standing and no authority to conduct investigations. I ask that this petition be dismissed and that my placement order for Ren Monroe be allowed to proceed as scheduled. He sat. The room was quiet. Dwyer removed her reading glasses and cleaned them with a cloth from her pocket. She put them back on and looked at the file in front of her. Ms. Callahan, she said, is Ren Monroe present today? Nora stood. Yes, Your Honor. She's in the witness room with a child advocate. I'd like to hear from her. Tull's lawyer stood immediately. Your Honor, the child is 9 years old. Questioning her in this setting could be traumatic and is unnecessary given the lack of substantive evidence against. Sit down, Mr. Prescott, Dwyer said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I'm not going to question her. I'm going to let her speak if she wants to. This hearing concerns her future. She has a right to be heard. Prescott sat. The side door opened. A woman in a gray suit entered, first a child advocate from the court, and behind her, walking with her hands at her sides and her chin level, was Ren Monroe. She was wearing the same jeans and pink t-shirt from the foster home. Her hair was in the braid she had done herself that morning, slightly uneven, but holding. Her sneakers were tied tight. She walked into the courtroom the way a person walks into deep water, one step at a time, feeling for the bottom. Every eye in the room followed her. She was led to a chair beside the witness stand, not in it, just beside it, a smaller chair that the advocate had placed there so Ren wouldn't have to sit in the high-backed witness box like a defendant. The advocate sat beside her. Dwyer leaned forward slightly. Wren, my name is Judge Dwyer. Do you understand why you're here today? Wren nodded. Can you tell me in your own words? Wren's hands were in her lap. Her fingers twisted together the way they had at the motel, the way they had at Margaret's house, the way they always did when the world asked her to speak and every part of her wanted to disappear. They want to move me, she said. Her voice was small but clear. It carried in the quiet courtroom like a single note in an empty church. To a new family. The judge said so. Which judge? Dwyer asked. Wren looked at the right-hand table, at Harlan Tull. She looked at him the way a child looks at the thing they're most afraid of directly because looking away would mean it won. Him, she said. Dwyer nodded. And how do you feel about being moved? Scared. Why? Wren was quiet for a moment. The clock on the courtroom wall ticked. The court reporter's fingers hovered over the keys. Because it happened before, Wren said. A man took me from Denver. He said he knew my mom. He said he was taking me somewhere safe. He drove me 4 hours. He brought me to a motel, and he said we were going to meet someone in the morning. She paused. Her breathing quickened, but she didn't stop. He said the person we were meeting would take care of everything. He said it like it was a normal thing, like delivering a package. The courtroom was absolutely still. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed loudly. And then the bikers came, Wren said. She didn't look at the back row. She kept her eyes on Dwyer. And they found me. And the police came. And I thought it was over. She stopped. Her hands tightened in her lap. But now they want to move me again. To a different family. And it's the same. Someone I don't know decides where I go, and I don't get to say anything. Dwyer's expression was unreadable. Is there anything else you want to tell me? Wren sat very still. The advocate beside her leaned in and whispered something. Wren shook her head. She didn't want coaching. She didn't want someone else's words. She looked at Harlan Tull, and then she spoke. In the car, she said, the man who took me, on the drive. He made a phone call. I was in the back seat. He thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. The room shifted. Prescott's pen stopped moving. Tull's posture changed, a tightening across the shoulders so slight that only someone watching for it would have seen it. He said a name on the phone, Wren said. He said the judge will take care of everything. And then he said a name. He said Tull. He said Tull's got the paperwork ready. She looked at Harlan Tull. She raised her hand and pointed. Her arm was thin and steady, and she held it there, her finger aimed at the man in the charcoal suit, the way a compass needle aims at north. That's him, she said. That's the name, he said. Wren held her arm there for 5 full seconds. 5 seconds in a courtroom is a long time. Long enough for every person in the room to follow the line from her small finger to the man in the charcoal suit. Long enough for the court reporter's fingers to stop moving. Long enough for the morning light from the east windows to shift almost imperceptibly, as if even the sun had paused to watch. Tull did not look away from her. That was his mistake. A man with nothing to hide would have looked confused. He would have looked at his lawyers, at the judge, at anyone else in the room, the way innocent people do when they are accused of something they didn't do. They look for help. They look for someone to confirm that this is a misunderstanding. Tull looked at Wren, and in his eyes there was no confusion. There was recognition. He knew her. Not her name, perhaps. Not the details of her face, but he knew what she represented. He knew the system she had come through, the path she had traveled, the notebook her name was written in. He looked at her the way a man looks at a piece of evidence he thought had been destroyed. The courtroom erupted. Not in noise, in motion. Prescott was on his feet, his hand already raised, objection forming on his lips before he was fully standing. The younger lawyer was whispering urgently into Tull's ear. Nora sat very still at her table, her hands flat on the wood, pressing down as if the table might float away. In the back row, Colt leaned forward slightly. Briggs didn't move. Ray's arms tightened across his chest. Milo's eyes were locked on Tull. Dwyer raised one hand palm out and the room stopped. Order, she said. Prescott spoke first. Your Honor, this is hearsay. A 9-year-old repeating a name she claims she heard in a car ride weeks ago. There's no corroboration. There's no recording. This is the testimony of a traumatized child who has been exposed to adults with an agenda against my client. It is unreliable, it is prejudicial, and it should be stricken from the record. "Mr. Prescott," Dwyer said, "I heard you the first time. Sit down." He sat, but his face had changed. The smooth confidence was cracking at the edges, the way ice cracks on a pond, when the temperature shifts not all at once, but in lines that spread and deepen. Dwyer looked at Tull. "Judge Tull, would you like to respond?" Tull stood. He smoothed his jacket with one hand. He looked at Wren, and then he made his second mistake. "The child is confused," he said. His voice was still controlled, but the edges had sharpened. The warmth was gone. The practiced grandfatherly patience had evaporated, and what was left was the real voice, the one that lived underneath the public one. It was harder, colder. It was the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "She's been through a traumatic experience. She's repeating things she's been coached to say by people who have an agenda against this court and against me personally." He pointed at Nora, not the way Wren had pointed with the steady precision of truth. He pointed with the jabbing anger of a man losing control of a room he was used to controlling. "This caseworker has a history of challenging my rulings. She has been reprimanded twice for insubordination. She recruited these," he gestured toward the back row without looking, a dismissive sweep of his hand, "these individuals to harass my court and intimidate my staff. This is a coordinated attack on the integrity of the Summit County Judiciary, and it should be treated as such." He was talking too fast now. The sentences were coming in bursts, each one slightly louder than the last. The composure he had worn into the courtroom was falling away in pieces, and everyone in the room could see it happening. Wren watched him. She sat in her chair beside the witness stand, her fingers pressed flat against her thighs, and she watched a 62-year-old man in a charcoal suit unravel. Her face showed nothing, but her eyes, the same eyes that had stared at a gas station clerk and willed him to read 2 words on a dollar bill, those eyes were steady. She had said what she came to say. The rest was not up to her. Tull turned back to Dwyer. "I ask again that this petition be dismissed." Dwyer said nothing for a long moment. The courtroom waited. The clock ticked. A car horn sounded faintly on the street outside, muffled by the thick windows. She looked at the file in front of her. She looked at Nora. She looked at Tull. She looked at Wren. She looked at Tull one more time. "Judge Tull," she said, "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Do you have any financial relationship, direct or indirect, with an entity called Mountain Crest Holdings?" Prescott was on his feet. "Your Honor, my client is not obligated to answer questions about his personal finances in a placement hearing. This is beyond the scope of—" "This is an emergency hearing in a federal court regarding the welfare of a child," Dwyer said. "The scope is whatever I say it is. Judge Tull, answer the question." Tull stood very still. The courtroom waited. "I have received consulting fees from various organizations over the course of my career," he said carefully. "I would need to review my records to confirm whether Mountain Crest Holdings is among them." "You don't know?" Dwyer asked. "I would need to review my records." $60,000 in 18 months, Dwyer said. 4 payments of $15,000 each. You don't recall receiving $60,000 from a single source. Tull's jaw tightened. A vein appeared on the side of his neck, faint but visible. "I received consulting fees from multiple sources," he said. "I cannot be expected to recall every transaction." Dwyer removed her glasses. She set them on the bench. She looked at Tull without them, and what she brought was apparently enough. "Here is what I'm going to do," Nathan said. "First, I am issuing an immediate stay on the placement order for Wren Monroe. She will remain in her current temporary foster care placement until further notice. Second, I am referring the financial records presented today, along with the placement pattern analysis in the sworn statement from the Summit County Clerk's Office, to the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Colorado for investigation. Third, I am suspending Judge Tull's authority over all pending family court cases, effective immediately pending the outcome of that investigation." She looked at Tull. "You are not under arrest, Judge Tull, but I strongly suggest you retain counsel for what comes next, and not Mr. Prescott, someone who handles federal matters." Tull stood motionless. His hands were at his sides. His face was a mask, but the mask had cracked, and through the cracks, something was visible that he had spent 20 years keeping hidden. It was not fear exactly. It was the expression of a man who has just realized that the walls he built to protect himself are the same walls that are now closing in. He turned and walked out of the courtroom without speaking. His lawyers gathered their files and followed. Dwyer looked at Nora. "Ms. Callahan, thank you for your diligence. I know what this cost you." Nora nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Dwyer looked at the back row at Colt and Briggs and Ray and Milo. "Gentlemen," she said, "I don't know exactly how you came to be involved in this matter, and I suspect I don't want to know the details. But the evidence you helped assemble may have saved lives. The court notes your presence." She struck the gavel once. The hearing was adjourned. The courtroom emptied slowly. Lawyers filed out. The clerk collected the water pitcher. The court reporter packed her machine. Colt stood and walked to the front of the courtroom where Nora was gathering her files. Her hands were shaking now. The composure she had held for 2 hours had finally released, and what was left was a woman standing in a courtroom with trembling hands and wet eyes who had just bet her career on a 9-year-old girl's testimony and won. "You did good," Colt said. Nora pressed her lips together and nodded. She couldn't speak yet. "Where's Wren?" The advocate took her back to the witness room. "I'll drive her back to Fort Morgan this afternoon." Colt nodded. He turned to leave. "Colt," he stopped. "She asked to see you before she goes." He followed Nora through a side door down a hallway with fluorescent lights and gray carpet to a small room with a table and 2 chairs and a window that looked out onto an alley. Wren sat at the table. The child advocate stood by the door. Wren looked up when Colt walked in. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much and were still somehow seeing clearly. "You came," she said. "Told you I would." I pointed at him. "I saw." "Was it enough?" Colt sat down across from her. "It was more than enough." "Is he going to jail?" "I don't know yet, but he can't touch you anymore. And he can't touch any other kid who comes through that court." Wren nodded. She looked at the table. Her finger traced a scratch in the surface, following its path back and forth. "I was scared," she said. "In there, my hands were shaking. I thought I was going to throw up." "But you didn't." "No. You stood up and you said what you knew and you pointed at the man who did it. In a room full of adults, in a federal courthouse. You did that." She looked up at him. "Because you said I was strong, at Margamo's house. You said I didn't have to feel it, I just had to be it. You remembered that. I remember everything." They sat in silence for a moment. The fluorescent light buzzed. Somewhere in the building a door closed. Footsteps echoed and faded. "What happens now?" Wren asked. "Nora's going to take you back to Margaret's. You'll stay there while they figure out the rest. And after that, they'll find you a family. A real one, not a Hendrix, not a system placement. A family that someone actually checked." "Will I see you again?" Colt looked at her. At this girl who had written 2 words on a dollar bill and set in motion a chain of events that had brought down a judge, exposed a pipeline, and landed in a federal courtroom. This girl who had gotten into a stranger's car because she was hungry and alone, and nobody in the entire city of Denver had bothered to ask her name. This girl who was 9 years old and had already survived more than most people encounter in a lifetime. "I don't know," he said, "but you know how to reach me." She almost smiled. Not quite, but the corners of her mouth moved in a way they hadn't before. "Yeah," she said, "I do." Colt stood. Wren stood. She didn't ask for a hug this time. She extended her hand, small and steady, and Colt shook it. Her grip was firm, firmer than the last time they had touched, when she had wrapped her arms around his waist and held on like he was the last solid thing in a world that was falling away. This time she shook his hand like an equal. "Goodbye, Colt," she said. "Goodbye, Wren." He walked out, down the hallway, through the courtroom, into the lobby, through the security doors, into the October sunlight on Stout Street. Briggs was waiting on the sidewalk, leaning against a parking meter, his arms crossed. "Done?" Briggs asked. "Done." They walked to the parking garage. Ray and Milo were already on their bikes. Nobody said anything about the hearing. Nobody said anything about Tull. Nobody said anything about what had just happened inside that courtroom, because there was nothing to say that the silence didn't already hold. They started their engines. The sound filled the concrete garage and rolled out into the street. They pulled onto Stout and headed west, 4 bikes in formation, toward the highway and the open country beyond it. 3 weeks later, Nora called. "Tull's been indicted," she said. "Federal charges, wire fraud, conspiracy, child endangerment, abuse of office. Decker Shanks is cooperating. He gave up everything. Names, dates, locations. The FBI raided the Hendricks property last week. They found records. They found a room in the basement that had been converted into something I'm not going to describe to you over the phone. Colt stood in the doorway of the clubhouse watching the sun set over the highway. The sky was red and orange and fading to purple at the edges. The 3 kids, he said, the ones who went missing. 2 of them have been found. They were placed with a family in Wyoming through an unregistered arrangement. They're alive. They're safe now. The 3rd, Nora paused. We're still looking. Colt closed his eyes. What about Ren? He asked. That's the other reason I'm calling. We found a family, a couple in Pueblo, Colorado. He's a retired teacher. She runs a small bookstore. They've fostered 3 other children over the past decade, all of them successful placements. Background checks clear. Home inspection clear. I cleared it myself personally. Ren met them last week. And she said yes. She said she liked the bookstore. Colt opened his eyes. The sun was almost gone. The first stars were appearing in the east. She wanted me to tell you something, Nora said. What? She said she's going to be okay. She doesn't know exactly how yet, but she's going to try. Colt stood in the doorway and I didn't speak for a long time. The highway hummed. The wind moved through the gravel lot. Tell her I believe her, he said. I will. The line was quiet for a moment. Colt, Nora said, there's one more thing. She sent something for you. I've got it here. I can mail it, or if you're ever in the area, you can pick it up. What is it? A dollar bill. Colt's hand tightened on the phone. She wrote on it, Nora said. Same blue ink, same handwriting. What does it say? Nora paused. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer. The professional tone was gone. What remained was just a woman standing somewhere with a phone in her hand, holding a piece of paper that weighed almost nothing and meant almost everything. It says, thank you, Nora said. Colt didn't respond. He couldn't. He stood in the doorway and pressed the phone against his ear and listened to the silence on the line and the wind outside and the sound of his own breathing, and he let the words sit where they landed. Mail it, he said finally. Okay. And Nora. Yeah. If anything ever goes wrong, if something changes, if she needs anything, I'll call you. Promise me. I promise. He hung up. A week later, the dollar bill arrived. A plain white envelope, Summit County return address handwritten in the upper left corner. No stamp, which meant Nora had mailed it from the county office through the internal postal system, the kind of envelope that arrives without ceremony and sits in a mailbox between a phone bill and a flyer for a tire shop. Colt carried it inside without opening it. He sat at the table in his room at the clubhouse. The room was small, a bed, a nightstand, a window that looked out onto the gravel lot where the bikes were parked. He turned the envelope over in his hands. It weighed almost nothing. He opened it. No letter, no note, no card. Just a dollar bill folded once tucked inside the envelope like a secret. He unfolded it. The same blue ink, the same handwriting, the same pressure marks where a pen had been pushed hard into paper by a hand that was small and determined and refused to stop writing. The letters were uneven. The T was too tall. The H leaned slightly to the right. But they were legible. 2 words written across George Washington's face by a girl who had learned somewhere between a gas station bathroom and a federal courtroom that the right words on the right piece of paper could change everything. Thank you. Colt held the bill in both hands and stared at it for a long time. The light from the window fell across the table, across his scarred hands, across the ink. Then he opened the drawer of his nightstand and took out the other bill. The first one. He had kept it there since the night at the gas station, folded in the same crease, the ink fading slightly, but still visible, still readable. Help me. He laid them side by side on the table. $2 bills, 2 messages, $2.02 worth of paper in the eyes of the United States Treasury. But in the eyes of the world, or at least in the eyes of the people who had been part of this story, they were worth something that couldn't be measured in currency. The first one had been a cry for help, written in a gas station bathroom by a 9-year-old girl who was running out of time and out of options. She had pressed her dollar flat against a porcelain sink and written the only words she could think of because there was nobody left to say them to. She had walked to the counter and placed the bill face up and looked at the clerk and willed him to see it. He hadn't. But 12 minutes later, a man with a scar down his neck had counted his change under a fluorescent light, and turned over the last bill and read two words that stopped him in his tracks. The second one was something else. Not a cry, not a plea. It was a statement. Written not from desperation, but from gratitude, not from the back seat of a kidnapper's car, but from a kitchen table in a safe house by a girl who had stood up in a federal courtroom and pointed her thin, steady finger at the man who had tried to make her disappear. A girl who had walked out of that courtroom on her own 2 feet. A girl who had chosen to fight. Help me. Thank you. The distance between those two messages was not measured in miles or weeks. It was the distance a person travels when they go from being someone the world happens to someone who happens to the world. Colt folded both bills carefully. He placed them together in the drawer side by side the way you place two photographs in an album. The way you preserve something you know you'll never need again, but can never throw away. He closed the drawer. He sat there for another minute, his hands flat on the table, looking at nothing. Then he stood, pushed the chair back, walked to the door, stepped outside. The evening air was cold and clean and carried the smell of sage and coming winter. The first stars were appearing faint and sharp, scattered across a sky that went on forever. The highway stretched east and west, dark and endless, the way it always did, the way it always would. The same road that had carried him to a gas station on a Thursday night. The same road that had carried a silver sedan with mud on its plates and a girl in the back seat. Briggs was sitting on the bench outside the clubhouse the way he always was. He had a beer in his hand but wasn't drinking it. He looked at Colt. "The bill came," Briggs asked. "It came. What's it say, thank you?" Briggs nodded slowly. He looked at the sky. He took a drink of his beer. "That's a good word, and," he said. Colt didn't answer. He walked to his Harley, threw a leg over the seat, turned the key. The engine came alive beneath him, that deep, familiar rumble that had carried him down 10,000 roads to 10,000 places he never planned to go. He pulled onto the highway and opened the throttle. The wind hit his face. The road unrolled ahead of him, a black ribbon disappearing into the dark. The stars wheeled overhead. The engine roared steady and strong, the sound of a machine that was built to keep moving and didn't know any other way. Behind him, somewhere in Pueblo, Colorado, in a small house near a bookstore, on a quiet street where the porches had rocking chairs and the yards had oak trees that were just beginning to turn gold, a 9-year-old girl was sitting at a kitchen table doing homework. A retired teacher was beside her, explaining long division with the patience of a man who had spent 40 years helping children understand things that seemed impossible until suddenly they didn't. A woman was shelving books in the next room, humming something without words, and the house smelled like bread baking in the oven. The girl had a blue pen in her pocket. She always carried it. She would carry it for years, not because she needed it, because it reminded her of a night when she had nothing in the world but a pen and $1, and the belief that if she wrote the right words, someone somewhere would read them. Her name was Ren Monroe. She was going to be okay. She didn't know exactly how yet, but she was trying, and that in the end was enough.